Hello everybody, and welcome back to the Dragon's Library. So today, I have something special, and this is a bit of a different review because we're doing a retro review. And of course, since this is the Dragon's Library, we're doing a retro review about Dragonheart. Now, this movie is kind of a piece of my childhood. It's from 1996, and it is one of the few movies I can actually say is a dragon movie. As in, it's a movie where dragons are more than just a final enemy at the end of the plot, or an incidental element that pops up for a single part. And what I mean by that is that dragons are just not that common in live action. Animation has a lot more dragons. That's because animation can do whatever it feels like. It costs about the same to animate a dragon as it does to animate a large fight scene with a crowd, or a really detailed action scene in an anime. They're all about the same level of animation budget. But in a live action movie, you have massive effects budgets, animatronics or CGI. It's really expensive to have dragon on scene for a long time. They're a very complex creature with a lot of weird animalistic movements that require a lot of extra detailing to make it look good. And this was one of the first movies to make it look good with CGI, so I thought it'd be fun to talk about it. There are other movies that have done things like this too, especially later on. Obviously, you have things like The Hobbit, The Desolation of Smaug, which has an extended scene with Smaug, who's one of the main characters, leading to Hobbit, The Battle of the Five Armies, which Smaug is like a big part of that, so I'm willing to count that as like a dragon movie. You have smaller things like Pete's Dragon, where the dragon's not on screen a lot, but it's still a pretty big presence throughout the movie. I'm talking about the remake, unfortunately, which is pretty decent. It's one of the better Disney remakes. And then you have flops like Aragon, where there was a lot of budget spent on Zafira, and she looks really good, and her voice actor is really good, but God, is that an awful movie. I'll get to Aragon one day. I need to talk about why I hate that movie so much one day, just to get on my system. But that is for another time, because right now we want to be positive. Unfortunately, despite wanting to be positive, turns out there's a lot of drama behind this movie. A lot of drama. So, let's start in with the premise.
If your sword goes up, my teeth come down.
Into the moonlit night, the Titans doomed, in mortal combat bound.
Now, Dragonheart's premise is pretty basic. There is a knight who follows the classic knightly code of honor and dignity, which is kind of dying out in the Dark Ages. He follows a king who is killed during a peasant uprising, and the prince, whom he was training in this code, nearly dies. To save him, the queen and this knight go to a dragon, who gives the prince a piece of his own heart.
Half my heart to make you whole, its strength to purify your weakness. Live and remember your oath.
After quelling the uprising, the prince grows more and more sadistic. This leads the knight to leave him. His name is Bowen, and he basically goes back to the dragon, blaming him for Aaron's corruption. The dragon flees, and Bowen vows to hunt him and the rest of the dragons to the ends of the earth. Years pass, and other humans alongside Bowen slowly hunt the dragons down to extinction until only one remains. However, him and the knight become locked in a stalemate, and realizing no matter who wins, there's nothing left for either of them, Draco, the dragon's name, and Bowen decide to work together instead for their own mutual benefit. Now, for 1996, this movie has some really nice effects. They ended up getting the team from Industrial Light and Magic. These are the same people who worked on Jurassic Park, and it really shows. Draco only appears on screen in a few full shots. There are parts of his body in other shots, but a lot of the time they're trying to avoid looking at him. But the few times you get a clear look, it looks so much better than anything else from this era in terms of CGI that it's not even funny. A few scenes look a little weird, like the scene where he was like partially turning into a rock to camouflage himself, but for the most part, it holds up really well. They do also mix in several practical effects, most notably the scene where the knight is trapped in Draco's mouth with a sword, and neither one of them can kill each other, because if they do, the other one will die as well. The reason for this mixing is not just because it helps save on budget, but because the movie was originally going to be done with animatronics and puppets. However, Universal decided to switch the production to using CGI after they got test run footage from Jurassic Park, which was in development while the movie was being pitched. However, despite how iconic Jurassic Park is, Draco ended up being even more advanced than those dinosaurs. Those things didn't need to emote or speak, so the team at Industrial Light and Magic needed to make a whole new facial system from the ground up in order to record his facial expressions. According to an interview on Lucasfilms.com, the model was immensely complicated, especially the head. The head alone had more points of topology than the entire T-Rex in Jurassic Park, body and all, which is insane. When Rob Coleman was asked about the sheer size of the data that needed to take up the head, he mentioned that to move that kind of data, typically you have to move a shape and wait 30 seconds for the computer to recalculate everything. Then it would update and you look at it and maybe you pushed it too far or not far enough and so you need to move it again. You were animating lines and it was horrendous. To make things simpler and to actually get the movie out within a decade, they used a new program called Caricature that allowed them to animate just the face in a manner more similar to like a digital mask. It had simple sliders and changed the model without reloading, saving them from hours and hours it would have taken to fine-tune if they had to wait 30 seconds after every change, which is essentially like the groundwork of modern CGI animations or facial capture, which is really, really cool. This was groundbreaking, because suddenly you could turn off the rest of the dragon, just have the face on your screen and craft all the expressions, Coleman continued. One of my shots was Draco saying, "I'm the last one."
I am the last one!
And you could hear Sean Connery's voice and accent saying, "Lashed." And I was looking in the mirror trying to find that mouth shape. You keyframe that animation, watch it, and modify it. We could do more iterations per day and per week, which made our work so much better than what it had been before. This was an incredible boon to CGI animation as a whole, and the idea that came from this movie is just so freaking cool. Of course, there was a creator behind this movie. Universal didn't just conjure this concept out of nowhere, even if their meddling went a bit far later on. See, despite the Dragonheart sharing prince being the title thing, the thing the movie's named after, it wasn't actually the original premise. The original idea was that Draco and Sir Bowen, after failing to kill each other, would decide to run a con where Draco pretends to attack a village by flying overhead, and Bowen would shoot him down, slay him, and then cash in the reward before they head to the next. This idea was thought up by Patrick Reed Johnson. He pitched the whole thing as Skin Game with a dragon in it, or Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Dragon. He thought the idea of a dragon and a knight working to con villages as the last of their individual kinds would not only be funny, but kind of sweet. In his words, the last dragon and the last knight that finally meet up in a stalemate and make a deal. This was sort of the first scene that I thought of with the knight in the dragon's mouth with his sword against the roof of his mouth. I knew they would come to the conclusion the only way for them to continue to survive was to stage these mock battles all over the countryside and get paid in heaps of gold. So he ended up getting a guy who worked on David Cronenberg's The remake of The Fly, and the two co-wrote a script. Once they pitched it, Universal gave them the green light because, producers apparently really liked it, and pre-production began. They also pushed for Sean Connery to voice Draco and were very happy when he agreed. And they added in a sort of deep rumbling during his recordings in order to make the voice sound more animalistic, which was really cool. I like it.
And when there are no more dragons to slay, how will you make a living, knight?
Unfortunately, as movie studios are wont to do, the producers began to meddle almost immediately. The original animatronic dragon effects were supposed to be done by Jim Henson's Creature Shop, the guys behind Dark Crystal, but as I explained earlier, Universal forced the crew to swap to mostly CGI. They also tried to go behind Patrick's back and just remove him from the project since he'd only directed one other film, which leads into a whole other issue with the new director they wanted. See, they tried to pitch it to a few other people first, but eventually they got the new director Rob Cohen. And the original creator, Patrick Johnson, was not generally a fan of him, and they kind of started fighting over their own individual visions for what this movie should be. I wanted this to be a more noble film than it ended up being. I still wanted it to be fun, and I wanted it to be something charming and clever. I wanted it to have a more European feeling, like something Terry Gilliam might do. This was what Johnson had said in a quote in an interview. And the actual conflict between the two co-writers and the new director seems to boil down to the tone they wanted the movie to have. Pogue and Johnson wanted the movie in a more sophisticated Robin Hood era with a bit of a more lighthearted tone, while Cohen wanted it set in the Dark Ages because he claimed it would somehow make dragons going extinct and then being forgotten more realistic and add a darker tone. Cohen also ended up scrapping a bunch of scenes, including one of the scams, because he thought doing all 3 scams would be too expensive, which, to be fair, it's one of the few things he might have been right about. The budget was exceeded multiple times during production. Other changes involved sidelining the Queen character, which explains why she doesn't show up as much as she probably should, given how much of a role she plays in the final reveal at the end. One particular scene was cut because Cohen claimed the love interest Kara shouldn't be making sapphic speeches, but others say he couldn't get the performance he wanted. However, the main problem was he seemed to want to focus on this as an action-heavy film, and he really wanted to push Draco and the special effects to the forefront, which led to them focusing on that and rushing it out a bit, and cutting some of the connective tissue scenes that made the movie feel slightly incoherent at times. If you ever watch it and you decide that it feels like it's jumping around a bit, that's why. A lot of the individual scenes that connected parts of the plot were cut for time or budget reasons, just so they could push more scenes of Draco, which, don't get me wrong, Draco looks really good. Cohen was not well liked by Johnson at the end. A lot of his changes seemed to clash with his original idea for the script. In one interview, he even said critical elements were missing, things were replaced, there was all this silly stuff. Like, there's this village that's surrounded by 10 million pigs, but all the people are starving, yelling out, "We're starving, we need meat, let's kill the dragon," but they're surrounded by pigs. So I'm trying to find logic here, I just didn't get that. To Cohen, these were minor issues, but to the writers, it was part of the moral framework of the story. The whole point is to test Bowen's character as the scams get bigger and bigger, each village is getting poorer and poorer, but the actual scenes contrast with that and make the characters who are acting like they're starving while surrounded by plenty of livestock look a little ridiculous, and Bowen look not as morally dubious as he probably would have otherwise. And so, like, again, it feels like Cohen was making changes without actually understanding the story and just trying to force his own vision for it, or what he thought he was going to get when he signed up for this epic fantasy dragon movie. This is also kind of shown in the villain, Enon.
The peasants are revolting. I wish we were down there. Just to see you in action, Bowen. Yours would be the finest blade on the field.
In the movie, the kid is so obviously corrupt from the word go. He's a little bitch, whining about how he wants to slaughter the peasants because they're revolting, and yay, we get to slaughter them all. He acts like a whiny, impulsive little brat, and it makes it stupid that Bowen ever thought his lessons were getting through to him. Apparently, in the original script, he was supposed to start more calm and confident at the start, especially after becoming immortal, because he's aware of it, before slowly realizing that his life is linked to the dragon and driving himself to madness while trying to keep it alive. In Johnson's words, this was the guy who had been given immortality. He knows it, or at least believes it. He's been saved by a dragon, he's blessed and unstoppable. An unstoppable guy doesn't go around raising. He's supremely confident and quiet. He kills with a whisper, not with a scream. My idea was Kinnan Bragnan, or someone of that ilk. They made Enon into this character who had nowhere to go. The whole first act of the movie was just screaming and yelling and throwing things. He was just being a whiny brat. Where do you go from there? You can't get bigger, you can't get smaller because the movie's supposed to build. My idea for him was just to be so quiet and you wouldn't know what he was going to do next. He had half a dragon's heart inside him, and it isn't until you see this dragon return to come for him and he realizes that the dragon dies, he's dead, that he really begins to panic, and then he starts going crazy. That's what you want, but you don't start there. Cohen was clearly responsible for a lot of the worst parts of the movie, and quite frankly, most of his changes seem to have been for the worst, which makes how he acted afterwards all the more galling. See, Cohen apparently claims that he's been aware of the project for years, and Johnson, the guy who pitched and co-wrote the frickin' movie, was merely involved with the script. Johnson apparently mostly just ignored him, but then Cohen went after his co-writer Pogue too, which really frustrated Johnson, especially after how much work they had put into writing and pitching the concept and getting the actors before he had even been involved. So yeah, you have this director who was brought on after 3 other directors refused to take the project, years after this thing started development, and then despite having basically been responsible for most of the movie's issues, tried to make it sound like it was all actually his idea and his work, and the creator of the original premise was just some random film student that had gotten attached to the project. In other words, he acted like a bit of an asshole. Now, despite all this, I do still really enjoy Dragonheart, and I want to kind of go over the movie with spoilers. So if you don't want any spoilers, and you want to just go watch it because maybe you haven't watched this before, go ahead and skip to the next part, the conclusion. There should be a timestamp on screen, or you should be able to select to the next chapter on YouTube, and I'll go ahead and wait until you guys are all gone. But I do recommend the movie if you're not going to, want to go pause and then come back here once you're done. So, I'll wait. Okay, so is everyone who doesn't want spoilers gone? Good. Let's get started. So, as I mentioned earlier, the movie starts with Enon and the knight Bowen training together. Eon is being a little bitch.
The peasants are revolting.
Yeah, he really is that whiny. And everything's kind of going alright. Bowen's trying to get him to actually be a decent human being. Then the peasants start revolting, which,
I wish we were down there.
No, you don't.
Yes, I do. Just to see you in action, Bowen. Yours would be the finest blade on the field.
Yeah, he really is the worst. But for some reason, Bowen doesn't see that and keeps trying to give him life lessons. During the fighting, however, his father dies and he runs away and gets shot and loses part of his heart and he's dying. But his mother, Iceland, doesn't want to lose him. So, since she knows of a dragon nearby, she goes to beseech it for help.
Those people loved your kind and called you friend.
The king's son, cruel and full of trickery. Half my heart to make you whole, its strength to purify your weakness.
The dragon does decide to help out, however, and after making Enon promise to be a just ruler, replaces his heart with half of his own. However, Enon very quickly breaks his word, and, well, I mean, this is what it looks like. Yeah, those are slave camps, building him a new castle and mining new stone. And of course, he and Bowen immediately get into a fight. Yeah, that doesn't end well for him, so Bowen goes off to the dragon and is all like, I want revenge. Dragon flies away, and Bowen leaves, and 12 years later, he has become like a dragon slayer. He's actually killed several dragons, and dragons in general are being hunted because you get a reward when you do it. There's a monk, Brother Gilbert, who, after witnessing his prowess, decides to follow him to record his exploits. He's kind of comedic relief. Meanwhile, back in Einon's kingdom, you got Kara, who, her father was one of the leaders of the rebellion, and she's asking Einon to free her. Instead, Einon kills him, which obviously makes her swear bloody revenge. Bowen, on the other hand, shot down a dragon and managed to kill it. He also stalks another dragon back to its cave, not realizing that it is indeed the same one he knew all those years ago.
Oh, you're good. Haven't had this sort of challenge in some time.
Nor likely to again.
During the fight, he manages to get into the dragon's mouth and stab his sword into the top of its mouth. This means the dragon can't bite down and kill him because it'll stab him in the brain, but he also can't move, so he's trapped there, and so it becomes a stalemate, and they kind of sit there for a while.
If your sword goes up, my teeth come down!
Eventually, they start to realize that if one of them kills the other, they have nothing left. I mean, if he kills the last dragon, then he has no dragons left to slay, which means he's basically going to have nothing to do with his life. And the dragon has no one left because the last other dragon he knew about was slain just before Bowen came to find him. They decide instead to have the dragon, who he kind of names Draco after a constellation, attack villages, or pretend to. Bowen will shoot him out of the sky, or pretend to. Dragon will go down. They'll go off into the forest. Bowen will come back saying he slayed it. They'll get some gold, and they also get to do something with their lives. So they start doing that, a sort of scam to have a living and not be bored to death, I guess. It's a weird movie. Anyway, while this is going on, Kara is trying to kill Enon and fails. Then she nearly gets raped. And realizing how horrible he is, his mother, Ison, finally helps Kara escape. She tries to get people to help her, but, they just don't care. Instead, they want to sacrifice her to the dragon. After Draco takes Kara to his lair, Enon arrives to recapture her, because he doesn't want to let her go, because he's being creepily rapist about it. And he fights Bowen when he realizes he's there. He nearly kills Bowen, but Draco intervenes and reveals that he's the dragon who shares a heart with him, which makes Einon run away in terror, nearly pissing himself. Like I said, he's a really pathetic guy. Kara is all like, we should overthrow him, but Bowen is all like, yeah, that worked out really well last time. So he doesn't really want to do that. Bowen reunites with Gilbert, that comedic monk in another village. But Kara, pissed because they both won't help her and are scamming villagers for money, exposes them, and they have to flee when Draco is nearly attacked after he's quote-unquote killed. There's then that scene I talked about earlier where they're in a village surrounded by pigs, but they're also going to commit cannibalism because the director had no sense of tone. Draco rescues them and takes them to Avalon, yeah, like that Avalon, and they find the tomb of King Arthur and the Round Table Knights, and that was a whole weird twist. So that happened, I guess. Bowen ends up finding out that Draco is the dragon that gave Enon his heart and argues that he corrupted him and ruined him. And Draco kind of is like, no, he didn't.
Einon was no innocent. He polluted the heart.
How do you know that? How do you know that, dragon?
The old dragons know that story. What was to be their hope became their doom. A spoiled, ungrateful child was given a great gift and destroyed it. And that's why I shared my life force with a dying boy, so I would reunite man and dragon and ensure my place among my ancient brothers of the sky.
Dragons don't get to just go to heaven, they have to earn a place in a dragon paradise afterlife, and if they don't do something great, then when they die, their soul just vanishes rather than going to an afterlife. He tried to basically do this great act of charity in the hopes that it would have a good effect so that he could earn himself his paradise. But since it didn't, if he dies now, he will essentially vanish as if he never existed. After hearing about it, Kara and Gilbert decide they're going to oppose Eon, but honestly, Bowen just doesn't want to do it. And then the ghost of King Arthur appears?
A knight is sworn to valor. A knight is sworn to valor. His heart knows only virtue. His heart knows only virtue.
Weird, but alright, I guess Bowen's on board now. I'll be honest, when I first appeared, for some reason I thought that was the previous king Bowen had served and not King Arthur. I don't know why I thought it wasn't King Arthur, but it was. Still very weird. Now that the heroes have all decided they actually want to deal with the villain, they go gather the villagers and start training them to be an army. They nearly win against him, but Gilbert manages to get a lucky shot on Enon straight to the heart. But what they didn't realize is that Draco and Enon share pain as well as a life, and when Enon gets hurt, Draco falls from the sky, and Enon's forces are able to capture him and treat. This is also when Enon realizes he's immortal, but only as long as Draco lives, so he chains him up in the castle. However, this is where we get one of those parts of the plot that doesn't make sense because they cut a lot of connective tissue. See, in the original script, Iceland, the queen, was supposed to have a lot more to do. And the reason for that is because she reveals that she's the one who has been funding the dragon slaying operation.
I know why you brought me the dragon slayer. You wanted them to kill him because you wanted me dead.
Basically, she's the one who convinced Einon to put a price out on dragon heads, and has been hoping that eventually, once enough of them die, one of them, the one who shared the heart with Enon, will die and her son will finally be killed, because she long ago realized that he was very much become a monster and irredeemable, and as someone who was aware of dragons and how they work, knew that, unlike Bowen, that it wasn't the heart that did it. She gave birth to a monster, and now she had to be the one who ended it. It comes out of left field, because aside from helping out Kara, she hadn't really done anything. She kind of laughed at one of the dinner tables, and that was it. So it was really weird when she just suddenly decided, oh yeah, I'm the reason that there are dragon slayers. Like, what the fuck? Anyway, Enon ends up killing her off screen, but honestly, it really hurts. Draco roars. It was a really good scene, actually. I'm really upset she didn't get more to do. Anyway, obviously this isn't going to stand because this is a movie and we gotta have our third act triumph. So, the rebels invade the castle, and Bowen has to throw Enon from atop the tower while they're fighting. He then has to go to Draco, who is like, look, I just need to die. And he eventually reveals that one of the reasons he didn't just die, not only because he was scared of death, but also because he had to make sure that his death wouldn't result in whatever nobles or officials Enon had working for him just taking over. He had to wait until the rebels or the peasantry had overthrown Enon, and only then would he allow himself to face his fear of death.
I had to wait for a time when mankind would not repeat my mistake and let tyranny thrive.
Like as a final act of redemption, essentially. Enon tries to charge towards them, but Bowen throws an axe into Draco's exposed heart, killing both of them. Draco's body dissipates because he has, in his final moments, redeemed himself, and he gets to go to the Dragon Heaven. Meanwhile, Bowen and Kara take over as like the new king and queen, I guess, with the stars shining to bless their kingdom forevermore. And that is, in fact, the movie Dragonheart. It's a pretty simple movie, all things considered, but I really do like it. Moving on to the conclusions, and welcome back anyone who skipped the spoiler story section. So, all things considered, Dragonheart is probably one of like the coolest fantasy movies for a lot of reasons. It made a decent amount of money, around twice as much as it cost to make it, which means it did make money, it was profitable. And you can tell it's profitable because it's had 5 movies in the series. Yes, there have been 5 Dragonheart movies. I actually didn't know that. I know there was a second one. I think I watched the second one when I was really young. I haven't watched it in a long time. But there was also, like, several other ones. Let's see. There was Dragonheart A New Beginning, Dragonheart 3 The Sorcerer's Curse, Dragonheart Battle for Heartfire, and Dragonheart Vengeance, the newest of which came out in 2020. I did not know there was a movie about Dragon released in 2020. I think it might have been straight to video. I don't know. I don't think it was in theaters. I feel like I would have seen it if it was been in theaters, but maybe I just missed it. I'm not sure. I'm going to have to do more research. Perhaps I'll talk about at least the sequel and maybe the following 3 prequel movies. Yeah, because the later movies aren't sequels. Dragonheart New Beginning was a sequel. The other 3 were prequels, it looks like. As for the conclusion itself, do I recommend you watch Dragonheart? Yeah, absolutely. If you're a big fan of special effects, this is one of the noteworthy movies when it comes to CGI effects, particularly dragon effects in history. This is the kind of stuff that led to modern motion capture and things like Smog in the Hobbit movie. So if you really think those kind of things are cool, or that special effects are cool, this is a must-watch movie, especially the making of documentary and stuff. If you just like dragons, this is a good dragon fantasy movie. If you like earlier fantasy stuff or earlier action movies that weren't afraid to have comedy that wasn't just quipping, I like quipping movies, it's fine. But there is something different about the comedy in this movie. It's a lot funnier, a lot more naturalistic. If you want that, yeah, this movie's kind of fun. If you're looking for that kind of old school fantasy feel from like the 90s, this is a very good example of that. All in all, I think Dragonheart is a movie that has, by and large, earned its place in history. It is a noteworthy for both its effects and story, and also its troubled production, like so many of the other great movies before it. So I would highly recommend you go watch it. With that said, we have the announcements. Hello everybody, it's been a while, like 3 weeks at least, if I get this out on the time I wanted to get out, so sorry about the delay. I had, well, an exhausting week on call, and then more stuff to do, and then I got distracted, and literally just could not do anything for like 3 straight weeks. I've been very busy, barely able to have time to stream, and I've been very tired. But I'm back, and I'm making stuff again, so I'll try and keep this up. I'll try and move on to the next thing. I'm either going to be working on the Empyrean book review, or I'm going to do a review of the Looney Tunes movie when that comes out. Probably the Empyrean book, but I need to finish that review up and get the script finalized, so we'll see about that. Yeah, not really much going on else. We're currently streaming both Avowed and Monster Hunter Wilds. Monster Hunter Wilds is on Tuesday, Avowed is on Thursday, both at 7:30 Central Standard Time PM. So check me out. I stream on both YouTube and Twitch. It'll be really fun to have you guys there. It's a lot of fun. Mushroom God, the game, is Avowed, and Monster Hunter Wilds is just Monster Hunter. So they're both really enjoyable games. I'm having fun with them right now. And you get to see dragons, I think, at least one of them. Finally, we have the Outcard. There is a subscribe orb. Click on it, go to my channel, and subscribe. And I guess I will see you all next time. There should be a video you recommend if you want to watch more of my stuff. Bye.